My name's Ethan. I'm 32 now, living in Denver, Colorado, running a small but thriving auto repair business I built from scratch. But the road to this point wasn't paved with support, love, or even stability. It was filled with silence, betrayal, and a ghost that decided to come knocking after 2 decades. My father. I was 7 when he left us. No warning, no long goodbyes. One night I went to sleep in my Spider-Man pajamas, and by the next morning, my mother's red, swollen eyes told me something was broken forever. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding a piece of toast, watching her scream into the phone. He was gone, not just from the house, but from our lives. He moved to California, remarried within a year, and started a new family. His words, not mine. I was the old one, the leftover, a symbol of his failure. From that point on, Mom and I were a team. She worked 2 jobs, nurse by day, waitress by night, and somehow still made time to help me with my homework. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I learned how to fix things early, not just appliances and engines, but myself. I never cried after the first year. I never mentioned him again. He was dead to us. I graduated high school, skipped college, and took a job in a local garage. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. The feeling of taking something broken and making it whole again. Maybe it was therapy. I worked hard, saved every penny, and eventually opened my own shop when I was 27. I didn't need him. That's what I kept telling myself every time I looked in the mirror and saw his chin, his nose, his eyes. The first time I heard from him again, it was a Facebook message. "Hey, Ethan, it's been a while. Can we talk?" That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a casual reach across the decades like nothing happened. I didn't reply. He tried again a few weeks later, this time an email, then a voicemail, then another. I listened to the third one out of morbid curiosity. His voice was older, raspier. "Ethan, I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to see you. Please." I deleted it. But then he showed up at my garage. I was under a Dodge Charger when I heard someone say my name. I rolled out from underneath, wiped my hands, and there he was. Gray hair, thinner than I remembered, eyes sunken in. My first thought wasn't rage, it was, damn, he looks sick. "Ethan," he said, voice shaking, "you look just like me." I didn't answer. I just stared. I need to talk to you. Please?" I nodded toward the street. "Not here." We ended up at a diner down the block. He ordered tea. I didn't order anything. He didn't even touch his cup. He launched into a speech about mistakes, regrets, how he thought he was doing what was best at the time. I was young, stupid. I thought I could fix things later. I cut him off. "Why now?" That's when he told me. He had stage 4 liver cancer. 6 months to live, maybe less. He had 2 daughters with his second wife, your half-sisters, he called them, like it meant something. They didn't know about me. He said they were struggling emotionally with his illness, and he wanted to make things right with everyone before he went. He looked at me like I owed him forgiveness just because he was dying. I asked him flat out, "Why did you really come back? Guilt?" He hesitated. "I also need help. Financially. Insurance isn't covering everything." That's when something in me snapped. You leave me, ignore me for 25 years, then ask for money. I stood up and walked out. I didn't say another word. But that wasn't the end, not even close. Because 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from one of his daughters. She was crying. "Are you Ethan? Our dad, he talked about you before he went unconscious. Please, he's asking for you. We didn't know you existed. Can you come?" And that's when the real story began. Not the story of a father trying to reconnect, but the story of why he really came back and what I found out when I stepped into his hospital room. I don't know what made me go to the hospital that day. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't some sudden family feeling. I think I just wanted to make sure he was really dying, that this wasn't another game. I showed up at the medical center in Aurora. The room was pale, like he was. Monitors beeped slowly, steadily. His eyes were half closed, but he opened them when he heard my name. "Ethan." His voice was like sandpaper. He tried to sit up, but couldn't. Standing by the bed were two girls. One looked about 20, the other a little older. The blonde stepped forward. "I'm Claire. This is my sister Cindy. We didn't know about you." I nodded. No point explaining anything. They looked scared, tired, broken. I looked at him. "What do you want?" His lips trembled. "I wrote a will. I included you. After everything, I owe you that." I laughed, bitterly. "You don't owe me anything. You already paid in full, with your absence." He looked at his daughters. "I don't want them to fight over money, but I don't trust their mother. She's already cleaned out my accounts." Claire turned away. Cindy clenched her jaw. I stared at them, realizing this wasn't just about dying. This was a battle over what was left. "So, why now?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Because I'm scared. I need someone to make sure they get what's theirs. And maybe I want to make peace before it's too late." I looked away. Peace isn't something you get to ask for when you walked away. But inside, something shifted. This was my chance to find out the truth. Not just about him, but about everything that happened after he left. And maybe to finally have some answers. After that hospital visit, things changed. I found myself tangled in a family drama I never expected. Claire and Cindy, his daughters from the new family, were caught in the middle, scared, confused, and desperate. Their mother, his second wife, was ruthless. She controlled everything: the money, the lawyers, the narrative. She wanted nothing to do with me. Every meeting with her felt like walking into a battlefield, where my father's name was both a weapon and a curse. But it was in those tense moments that I started learning the real story. My dad hadn't just left because he wanted to escape. He was running. From debts, from bad decisions, from promises he couldn't keep. The money he had left was barely enough to cover the hospital bills, let alone any inheritance. And the will? It was a mess. Lawyers told me half the assets were already tied up in trust funds for Claire and Cindy, locked away under his wife's control. The rest was questionable. Some business interests that were practically worthless, some old cars, and a house nobody wanted. It wasn't the fairy tale I thought it would be. But even in that mess, I found something I wasn't expecting: respect. Claire told me she admired how I built my life without any help, and Cindy confessed she always felt like she didn't know her real father at all. For the first time, I wasn't just the abandoned kid or the resentful son. I was a brother. Slowly, we started working together, trying to untangle the mess he left behind. And through it all, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't the goal. Justice was. Making sure what little he left was divided fairly, and that his daughters weren't trapped in a lie or a war they didn't ask for. But just when I thought I was starting to find peace, the biggest shock came. The one that changed everything.
The shock hit me like a freight train, and it changed everything I thought I knew about my father and our fractured family. It was a chilly autumn evening when Claire, Cindy, and I were going through what felt like endless boxes and old furniture in the dusty attic of his worn-down house. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and forgotten memories. We were sorting through stacks of files, receipts, and letters, each one telling a fragmented story of a man who had lived two very different lives. Then, behind a loose wooden panel, Cindy found it. A hidden safe, dusty and heavy, almost forgotten. The lock was old, rusted, and sturdy, but somehow, with a bit of trial and error, she managed to crack the combination. It was scribbled faintly on an old crumpled receipt, a detail no one else knew about. Inside the safe were piles of documents, bank statements, personal letters, investment records, and most importantly, an envelope addressed to me in my father's handwriting. My hands shook as I carefully unfolded the letter, feeling the weight of every word before I'd even read them. In the letter, my father poured out his regrets, the debts he couldn't pay, the lies he told to keep us apart, and the pain he caused to both families. He admitted to running away not just from his responsibilities, but from the crushing pressure of failure. But buried in his confession was a revelation I never expected: a secret bank account, set up years ago, hidden from his second wife, meant solely for me. "I never deserved your forgiveness," he wrote, "but I want you to have this, so you can build a life I never gave you." The amount wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to pay off some lingering debts, to invest in my business, to give me a fresh start that I had fought so hard to create on my own. That night, as I sat between Claire and Cindy, the weight of the past lifted just a little. We weren't just broken pieces. Maybe we were the beginning of something new. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the pain or forgetting the betrayal. It was about freeing ourselves from its grip. It was about choosing what kind of family we wanted to be from now on. The next day, I did something I never thought I would. I called my father's wife. I told her we intended to handle the estate fairly, that there was no need for more bitterness or fighting. The conversation was tense. There were moments she threatened legal action, moments she tried to manipulate the situation, but I stayed calm. I told her firmly that Claire and Cindy and I would work together, that we wanted peace, not war. Over the following weeks, the tension eased slowly. The daughters stood by me, and we made sure the estate was divided properly. It wasn't just about money. It was about truth, justice, and finally facing what had been buried for too long. In the end, I didn't just inherit some money or property. I inherited clarity and a chance to rewrite my story on my own terms. The betrayal that once defined my past no longer had to control my future. I realized family isn't just about shared blood. It's about the people who stand beside you when everything else falls apart. And sometimes the strongest family you have is the one you build yourself.
The months that followed felt like the slow, steady closing of a long, painful chapter that had defined much of my life. After settling the estate and finally exposing all the buried truths, a kind of peace started to settle in my chest. A peace I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Claire, Cindy, and I kept in close contact, not out of obligation, but because, strangely, it felt like we were carving out a new kind of family from the wreckage left behind. We exchanged stories about our father, shared memories, some tender, others raw and filled with anger, and slowly began to build a relationship that neither of us expected. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the old pain bubbled up, but with every conversation, every shared laugh or tear, we grew stronger. When my father's health finally failed, and he passed away quietly in the hospital, I was there. Not because I owed him anything, but because I chose to be. I sat by his bedside, watching the man who had once abandoned me take his last breath. Forgiveness was not something that came easily. It didn't magically erase the years of hurt or silence, but it came, eventually,
Not because he deserved it, but because I needed it. For my own healing, for my own freedom from the bitterness that had weighed me down for so long. Forgiveness freed me more than it freed him. The business I built kept growing. The money from the secret account gave me a financial boost that helped expand and stabilize my shop, but it was the lessons I learned along the way about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of truth that truly fueled my success. I often think about how sometimes the people who hurt us the most inadvertently teach us the most valuable lessons, even if they never meant to. My family story is far from perfect. It's messy, painful, and complicated, but it's mine. Now I'm the one writing the next chapter on my terms, surrounded by people who choose to be in my life, who support me and stand by me when it counts. Because family isn't just about blood or DNA. It's about the people who show up when it really matters. And for me, that means everything. It means hope, it means healing, and it means a future I never thought was possible.